Alright guys, so we have the basic setup and everything seems to be working. It's just that we have those inconsistency on those dots. Now that's not because of our simulation setup, again it's because of our emitter is actually doing that already. So if you go to the pyro source, you can see they're breaking apart like this. And if you trace all the way back to the particle system, you can see the same break part kind of like effect. So the problem starts actually from here. Now because of that, we can't actually easily fix that in the simulation stage. They're already broken right here. So let's keep tracing back and see what's happening here. So before that, we have the pyro particle pop network, and that does the breakup already, right? The debris is actually fine because those are just the debris, right? They're going, you know, whatever they're supposed to be doing, so that's fine. Those are the emitters for the particles. So the reason is that the particle later on we emitted from the pop network actually are having inconsistency, although they're pretty good later on. But on frame 12 or so, that's when we see that happening a lot, or earlier frames. So we have to figure out a way to fix that. So let's take a look at the dot network. We're now displayed on it. So one of the things we can try to enhance is the substeps, just like the substeps we were talking about in the dot network for the simulation. This part can also be enhanced by cranking up the substeps. So let's actually go ahead and go to the simulation tag of this dot network. We're gonna go ahead and change the substep to something like 2. Let's see if let's see if this gets a little bit better. Now you can see we're getting a little bit more connected in the middle, right? After substep has been changed to 2 on frame 12, you can see now they're more connected. So we're still getting pretty fast simulation speed, so I'm gonna be a little bit more higher here. So let's try 4, see if it does get better. As you can see now, it's much better with 4. Let's just go a little bit more than that, maybe 8, doubling those numbers. The more you go, the better it looks like. Now you can see they're really consistent now because of the substep is trying to calculate between frames to get a more realistic kind of like result. Okay, so I'm gonna say 8 is probably enough, but you can keep cracking that up. The particle simulation is still pretty fast in my opinion, so I'm gonna settle down with 8 for now, and let's go ahead and cache it again underneath it. So save to disk. As you can see, it's still going pretty fast. Actually, it takes almost no time to calculate 115 frames. So I will say this is actually pretty cheap to go for. So 8 substeps, although could be too much for some other simulation that has you know, more complicated and more particles. But for this amount of particles, it's actually handled pretty well. So now we have a much better distribution of these lines. If you go ahead and take a look at our cached result, that's pretty cool. So we can actually take a look at the effect from our new particle system to the VDB from particles. Let's take a look. Right, we're getting much more visible lines down the way, which is pretty nice. Right. Now a few things I probably want to change is that I kind of wanted to see a little bit more than that. So I'm gonna say, how about let's change the radius back to 1 so we can see a little bit more of the particles. And let's see, minimum radius to ignore, right? Points with radius less than this number of voxels are ignored. So 0.2 is actually what we're having now. There is a little hint down there. So you should not set this lower than 1.5 and 0.2, so that's way lower than that. So I'm gonna say maybe 1.5 back, see if that's better. It's actually not better, so I'm gonna go back just to have a little bit more visible detail here. But again, it's gonna affect the anti-aliasing as they mentioned there, so I'm not sure if I should do this or not, but seems like it's getting better result. So I'm gonna settle down with that. The voxel size again is the quality or resolution, so I'm gonna make that half of the original so that I'm getting better results, although this is gonna crank up the simulation time too, so be aware of that. Okay, we have the volume up. Now compared to what we were having earlier, that's what we were having earlier, and that's the new result we're getting. You can see we're bringing back a lot of more detail here. So I'm gonna recache this guy again, so save to disk. Alright, now you can see VDB from particles is actually pretty fast. Even we have cranked up the quality to much more than before. It's still calculating on a reasonable speed. So that's why I do recommend you to use really use a VDB instead of fluid source. But you can try fluid source, of course. You just need to wait for a very long time for this to calculate. Anyway, I'm gonna pause this until it's done. Alright, now we're back. So after the caching, we're gonna go ahead and take a look at our simulation results from our new emitters. So go back to the pyro smoke simulation actually, and let's play it again. Now you can see we're getting a much more denser result with a very consistent trail. Now I do have a problem. This seems to be too thick. Of course, if this is what you want, right? So I'm not gonna say this is bad. This is almost like case-by-case scenario, but I think they are probably too much. My scale source volume was 8, and now that's probably too much. Now I'm going to change that back to 4 just to have lesser density. Right. Alright, better. Maybe even smaller than that. Let's try 2. Okay, now we're getting lesser, and this looks more reasonable now. On frame 12 compared to before, we have much more consistent trail compared to, you know, earlier we have is even for those really fast moving guys, we're having a solid trail here, which is much better than before. Now we're actually not having, simulation wise, we're not really having a lot of variations. It's just now we're getting a better result compared to before. Okay, just to visualize this better, I'm also going to go ahead and set up my lighting. I did actually have lighting before when I was trying to do some test render before, very earlier. I'm going to go ahead and grab those lights. They're actually in the camera track to Houdini FBX. Those 2 lights, I'm going to cut those guys out by pressing Ctrl X and go back to the object level and Ctrl V to paste those guys. I have disabled those guys by checking off light enabled and enable in viewport. I just need to turn those guys back on. Oops, not that. Let's see. Yeah, this one is on. This one actually. Alright, now we have a better representation of, you know, the smoke. Now we can see a, you know, more realistic results. Alright, so that's gonna be it for this part. As you can see, after the tweaking, we're getting a way better result compared to before. Again, those things can be done in earlier stages if you can see those problems already, but depending on how fast your object is moving, you probably want or don't need actually to tweak those things we did in this tutorial. But if you do find inconsistency on those trails, you probably want to go back and crank up the substep of our particle simulation again underneath pyro source. What we did here is actually on the pop network, we just cranked up the substep quite a bit to enhance the result. Alright, cool. So in the next one, we're going to go ahead and see what else we can do right to this explosion. So see you next time.